Hey Computer, play About Bees podcast.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back once again to another episode of About Bees, Culture, and Curiosity with your hosts, Ron Miksha, that's me, and
Bedzina Mosiashvili.
all right,
And
you got it right too this time. Yeah, all right, Bedzina, you've had a hectic day, haven't you?
Well, it wasn't that hectic. I had an appointment with the eye doctor. Yeah, I need prescriptions. I just squinting too much and too much stigmatism and whatever. And anyways, the appointment took longer than expected, and now we're late to the podcast. So we have some very dying news to tell people, and we couldn't get to it because these eye doctors.
Yeah, well, they're going to hear it at the same time they would have anyway.
Yeah.
The audience is going to hear, like, it doesn't matter if we would have recorded this an hour from now yet, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But here we are right now. And you're right. We want to talk a little bit about what's killing the bees. And you notice I'm not saying what's killing the honeybees. I'm saying what's killing the bees, because we are going to focus on honeybees, but I think we also need to mention what's killing the other bees, because whatever is happening to all the bees around the world could potentially be happening to honeybees at the same time. So I think that's important for us to kind of pick up on. So I have a slide up now for people who are listening. I can describe it. And what I've got in the slide is basically there's some information. I'll read the information first, and then I'll get to the photograph of the bumblebee that's on the slide as well. So what's killing the bees? Well, if we just look at North America, because we're very much centered in North America and we don't care about the rest of the world, apparently, there are 4,337 species of what we might call native bees in North America. And there are probably 3 or 4 species of bees that have arrived to North America from other parts of the world. But basically, the over 4,000 species have always been here, and always in terms of, let's say, the last 10,000 years or so. So they are well adjusted to the current ecology. Well, not the current ecology. We should probably go back a generation or two from ourselves, maybe 100 years ago. They were well adapted to the environment, the ecological niche that they fulfill inside of their location in North America. That's been changing. Things have been changing because of a lot of reasons we're going to discuss a little bit of. But out of those 4,337 species of native bees in North America, there are about a half to a quarter of that number have actually been looked at by scientists. So we know the other 3,000 species exist, but only about 1,400 species of bees have actually been monitored, counted, looked at, kind of mapped out regionally. That's still a lot. I mean, that's a lot of bees to have over 1,400 species of bees kind of looked at by professionals, by entomologists.
Right.
Okay.
But I guess I'm coming from a lay person's perspective. How do they know if there's 4,337 if they've only assessed 143.7?
Okay, that's a really fair question. So they have actually identified 4,337 different species. So, you might spot a bird with your binoculars and taking a photograph of it. Now, that doesn't tell you whether that bird is going to be going extinct next year, or how many of that particular bird exists in all the different parts of North America. You just know that there's at least one unique species of that particular bird that you touched upon once or twice or 10 times, but not enough to actually assess how viable they are. How well are they doing? Are they reproducing at a normal rate? Have we been following them for a number of years? So when we say that there are 1,437 species that have been assessed, that really implies that a lot of work has been done there are scientists out there. These guys and gals are out there crawling around in the flowers in the mud and in the swamps and in the forests of the mountains, and they're actually tagging some of these bees. They're following them to their nests. They're collecting data on them, and then they're collating the data with other scientists who are looking at the same species. And from that, they can discover that about half have been having a declining population. So half of what we know about has a declining population. And since we have a pretty big sample, that's 1,400 out of 4,000, that's a pretty big sample. We could pretty well justify being able to say that's probably true among all the bees in North America. About 50% have declining populations. That in itself is not a big showstopper. That doesn't mean the end of the world. If their population is declining, it could be cyclical, could mean that 10 years from now, the population is going to bounce back up or something. What's really makes the scientists and people who are concerned about biodiversity, which we all should be, and ecology, the thing that concerns them is that of that number, about 350 species, that's about half of the half that are declining, are so small in number and are so localized in location that they are probably going to go extinct unless something dramatically changes. So that, again, by extension, yes, go ahead.
And what is this phrase that gets thrown around, declining population? So they're still finding them, but every year they're finding them less and less.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So this represents a lot of work, a lot of legwork, a lot of looking, a lot of counting. But there are surveys being conducted by the dozens all over North America, and almost every university in North America has some entomologists that are working on some bugs or another and counting and looking and trying to determine what is going on with them. So these data that I just presented are actually from way back in 2017. That's getting on close to 10 years ago. And at that time, and since it was published in 2017, it probably relied on information from a year or two before that. So it probably is 10 years old. So within the past 10 years, if I could find something more updated, we would be able to see if it's still 749 declining, or maybe it's only 400 declining now because they had seen some changes, or those 347 species at risk extinction, maybe only 200 species are left alive. So those are things we don't know because this is a slightly dated set of data. But it's from the Center of Biological Diversity. Anyone could look them up online and find this same. They have a very interesting PDF that you could download and read, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes for this program so people can follow up and see that. Now, what's that picture about? First of all, what can you tell me about the picture?
So to me, it looks like a bee inside of a compass.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. It is a bee. It's not inside of a compass. It's inside of this little, let's see if I can get it up here to the screen. It's inside of a little container cap. And I'm going to put that bee into my hand. And I don't know how well, let's see, it's really awkward for me to do this, reaching out like this, but let me see. Okay, now there it is. This is a bumblebee. And this bumblebee, now people who are looking at my image and not the screen image at the moment, they will see that I'm holding by the legs a dead bumblebee, and that bumblebee has a very peculiar problem. It can't fly. Yes?
What's the species of bumblebee, sir, that you're holding?
Oh, I should know that. I had it written down and I forgot. So let's just say it's Bombus, Bombus something or another. So Bombus something or another was discovered by a beekeeper in British Columbia who sent it to me. He sent me this bee because if you look at the image I have on the screen, it should have these long, shiny wings reaching all the way down to that yellow, tawny colored band, that ring that's in the middle of the bee's back section. It should be, that should be the length of the wings. But this beekeeper was out working his bees and he heard this weird buzzing sound on the ground. And he looked around and he saw this bee, which is now dead and which he sent to me. And when it was alive, it couldn't fly because its wings are seriously stunted by a deformed wing virus. And he speculated that that virus probably jumped from his honeybees to the bumblebees. Now, we don't know that for sure. We can't blame it entirely on honeybees. It may have happened, or it may be that the honeybees have been picking up this deformed wing virus from bumblebees. So we don't know who's carrying and who's passing to whom, but we do know that it was found next to colonies of bees by a beekeeper who sent it to me, and he wanted me to confirm to him that I thought it probably was, at least on the surface, it would indicate the same malady, the same disease, the same disorder as a honeybee's wing deformity. Yes.
So the native or wild bee species can contract the same diseases as commercial bees or farmer bees or domestic bees.
Exactly. The honeybees viruses, some of them, we don't know about all of them. We don't know which ones don't transfer. We don't know if maybe they all do, but we do know for sure that some do transfer between species. Just like, people are getting sick, and unfortunately, one person has died from bird flu virus. Now, that's a virus. It jumps species from birds to humans. So we would assume that the viruses that affect honeybees would jump more readily to native bees, to wild bees, than the bird flu virus jumps from birds to humans. So this is this is reality. This is when you have things in very dense situations, like hundreds of thousands of chickens in a few square kilometers of land, and hundreds of thousands of humans in almost as dense a situation, not quite, diseases spread more easily. So that could be one of the things that's killing the bees. The presence of honeybees might be killing some native colonies of bees. The fact that honeybees sometimes are foraging at the same flowers as native bees, although that's not as frequent as people assume. The honeybees are not really competing with native bees as much as a lot of people think. In fact, I think the actual overlap is very, very small between honeybees. Right. So honeybees aren't really stealing a lot of food from native bees. And the disease jump is pretty rare, so rare that in my entire lifetime, I have seen and been sent one sample. And it might have been at that bee, the bumblebee, because this deformed wing virus, it is something that does exist in wild colonies of bumblebees, even when honeybees aren't right next door. So we don't know that it jumped. So what's killing the bees? Some people want to say honeybees, and certainly there are situations and times when a density of honeybees and disease transfer could contribute to the success, the reproductive success, the lifespans, the existence of native bees. But the amount of decline and the locations of these declines are happening often in places like the sides of mountains where nobody's keeping bees, or in the Arctic tundra where there are very few species of bees, but they are also at risk. It kind of leads us to think that what's killing the bees is probably more likely to be things like climate change. The temperature's just getting too warm. They just have to change their location, settle, in a little cooler area if they can, for some of the bees. And for sure, one of the things that kills off native bees is intensive monoculture agriculture that consists of just one variety or species of some plant that we grow, humans grow for food, and that takes
Now,
out virtually all the other. Yeah, let's hear
now
from you, Bitsina.
we hear all this bad news about native bees, but is there any good news? Is there any good? I mean, the episode's going to be what's killing bees, but maybe we'll have a silver
Mhm.
lining in the end, in the later. But is there any? Are the native bees
No,
doing
that
any?
would be a spoiler, and we'd have to give a spoiler alert. We will not be talking about anything good.
Okay.
Sorry. You know, you bring up a really good point, and it wouldn't be news if we said, "Ah, there were more Bombus terrestris in North America, Eastern North America than there was the year before." That probably wouldn't make headlines as much as the rusty patch bumblebee is disappearing and, hasn't been seen in Wisconsin for the last 30 years. Things like that are news. So I don't have my hands on the good news. We do have some good news about honeybee populations. You probably know that. But as far as these others, no.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well.
That
Okay. Well, let's keep the show going. Let's see what do you got and what do you got in the treasure box here? We're up your sleeve.
Okay, what's next in the treasure box is we're going to start focusing on the honeybees because I know most of the listeners are more curious about what's killing their honeybees, and we will talk about that a bit. But one of the things that I find really kind of frightening is, well, here is a headline from the magazine Bee Culture, which is there are two principal bee magazines in the United States. They're both good. The American Bee
Right.
Journal, I've been a subscriber to both of these journals for quite a long time. American Bee Journal was founded by the people who founded Dadant Bee Supplies, and it's been around since around 1860 or so. And just as old, maybe a few years older, a few years younger, I lost track, is a magazine that used to be called Gleanings, like, the farmers are out gleaning the wheat and removing the good stuff from the bad stuff. That's called gleaning. When you shake the stalks of wheat and the grains fall out and you
Oh, I
throw away
see.
the
That's
straw.
what it's called.
That's gleaning. So it used to be called Gleanings in bee culture, which implied that in those rustic days when the magazine was started, they were going to go around and look at things about bee culture and remove the things that were wrong, that were, not worth your time and trouble. And they would find the good news, the information that beekeepers could use, and those would be the gleanings. Now,
Mm.
I was really sad because I grew up reading Gleanings in bee culture, and I've still got copies that my father had given to me from the 1940s, and, that's 80 years ago now, and those copies are, they're sitting right behind me in the bookshelf, actually. Those copies are an invaluable treasure, and they're all called Gleanings in Bee Culture, but a few years ago, probably 20 years ago, the people who own Gleanings in Bee Culture, they decided that what an old-fashioned name. We've got to update this a little bit. So they dropped the Gleanings because I think probably half their readers didn't understand what the word gleanings meant anyway. So it became Bee
Right.
Culture. And on the side, I should also add this just a little bit, and that is the fact that, as I said, American Bee Journal, very classy magazine, very good information in that. I've written quite a few articles for them over the years. That's kind of why I'm saying that. It's not necessarily any better than Bee Culture, but they were started by the Dadant people in Hamilton, Illinois, and the Bee Culture magazine was started by the Root, ROOT company, which was also a major beekeeping supply manufacturer, and they were located in the state of Ohio. So they had these two different outfits, both supplying beekeepers with all the materials, smokers and frames and equipment, extractors that they would ever need, and they also had their own magazines. And, they both worked really hard at having good information out. So we still have that slight edgy competition between these two journals. Bee Culture, the Magazine of American Beekeeping, as it says in the headline.
I like that name though, Gleaning.
Yeah, I know. I miss it. I really miss the gleanings. I could probably pull up one of my old gleanings copies to show off, but that would be showing off, and that's something I just try to avoid, That's not
We should maybe do like um, a end of the year gleaning episode where
Hey, I like the way you think. That's good. I think we should. So the headline here is National Survey indicates highest bee colony losses in 14 years. And that was from 2023 to 2024. So this is 2025, so it's not that old of news. And I just want to read a little piece out of here. So the study came out of Auburn, Alabama, and it was released in December of 2024. And it basically says that the American beekeepers have lost more colonies of bees than they have any year since the year 2010, 2011. So in all those years, they hadn't lost as many bees as they did now. U.S. beekeepers lost an estimated 55.1% of their managed colonies in 2023 to 2024. And that's 15% higher than the long-term average of 40%. I keep telling people, back when I started keeping bees, beekeepers lost 10% of their hives a year on average. Queen failure, they got the bees lost population. They got stuck on one side or another of the beehive. 10% was a very normal number of colonies of bees to lose. Then the last few years, I was telling people, well, it looks like we're losing 25 to 30% of our bee colonies every year. And now we're looking at a 13-year average in the US of A of 40%. And last year, 55 freaking percent of the beehives died. That's over half. Over half. If you've got 1,000 colonies of bees, you went through them the next spring or summer or whenever they start dying off for you, and you only have 450 left?
Now I'm gonna get
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get a little bit cynical. How many of those commercial bee farmers killing their bees on purpose so they can get a tax write-off at the end of the year?
Zero.
Zero?
Yeah.
Okay.
But cynicism is good. I indulge in it often, and I think it's very healthy, and it makes you question things like that, and that's a very good point. But no, it doesn't work that way for the bees. We don't get tax write-offs for bees being dead or alive. We might get tax write-offs for equipment that has, expired or been burnt in a fire or something like that for the equipment, but not the honeybees themselves. There's no tax write-off for that.
Okay.
So, and that's where the bees are dying. That's where they're disappearing. We still have the equipment sitting there stacked up in the old barn. Whoops, I'm just flipping through here a little
When
bit.
you hear a number like that, 55% of the managed bee colonies have died. Shouldn't that ring our alarm bells for everyone? Like, certainly running around like chickens with their heads cut off. I mean, we shouldn't be doing that, but that's kind of where, that's a number where you should be thinking, that's what the behavior should equal. So
we should see it as sustainable. We should just be looking at that and saying, this is impossible. We can't go on, having over half of our colonies of bees, or even in the 40% average, which is almost half of all the colonies for the last 10, 15 years, 40% have died in the United States every year.
Yeah, because if they have this consecutively, like every year, 50%, 40%, because then they just hit, because right now, sure, they lost that much, but they could probably get back up to that their original numbers if they work hard.
They do
enough
get
or-
back up to those
Yeah.
original numbers and even surpass it because they're making more splits, they're being more efficient, they're, knowing when and how to make those divides better and build them up faster with artificial foods.
So it's like a case of like you lose 55% every year, but then you make 65%, 70% next year, whatever, maybe double. But if we have a situation where they're making less than what's dying every year, then we're screwed. Then next, it just creates a chain reaction because
That's
you
right.
hit that once that domino, like it's just exactly, So
Exactly.
at that point yet, has that happened where we've had multiple consecutive high death?
Oh, we do have them multiple and consecutive because it's 40% every year. Or if it's 50% every year, then you go from 1,000 to 500 the next year. And if you're too poor or just, unable or unwilling to invest in the bees again, then the second year you come through spring with 250 and the third year with 125 and the fourth year with 60 colonies and the year after that with 30. And you're down to having 5 hives of bees in your backyard within about 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
And of course, those bees will be dead soon enough too.
Yes. And every year your income is getting smaller and smaller because you have less honey to sell, less bees to sell, less beeswax to sell.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So they have to keep, the beekeepers out there who are listening, man, I feel sorry for you guys. It's tough. This is such a tough way to make a living. You are buying bees, you're splitting good colonies that might have made a huge bumper crop just in order to get your numbers back up each year. It really is a difficult situation. So let's move on with, let's see if I can, yep, here we go.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yes, I guess I want to add to that is not that it's kind of elevated any much, but the varroa mite has been a recent thing for beekeepers.
Well, 40 years now.
Yeah, so it's really been tough for I would yeah.
Yeah, it has
It's
been
not
tough for the
yeah.
last, yep. Yeah, it has been tough for the last 40 years. So, I thought that maybe we could dig down and go from the United States of America, our best friends and allies, our next door neighbors, those good folks to the south of us up here in Canada. Those guys have shown that they have got their bees disappearing. And we're
So
going
we
to
have
look at Canada.
a chart here, a survey. To
Mhm.
would you like I think you were about to describe it there. I cut you off.
No, yeah, I am about to describe it. So
Yes.
what's on the survey? We have a list of the provinces of Canada, including Newfoundland and Labrador, which is one province, and Prince Edward Island, which is our smallest province, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. So those 4 are Atlantic provinces. They're close to the ocean. They're north of Maine, north of Maine. That's about it. They're not even north of Vermont, I don't think. North of Vermont would be Quebec. So in those 4 provinces, there are only about 50,000 colonies of bees. And
Yeah.
one of them, the little Prince Edward Island, had lost 65% of their colonies of bees over winter between 23 and 24.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know between 24 and 25 yet because we're living that problem right this moment. But these losses, they're just amazing. Now, the best one, but it's statistically so small, Newfoundland had fewer than 700 colonies of bees in the summer 2 years ago, and only about 70 of those died. So their winter losses were roughly 10%. That's
I mean,
all.
they don't.
So
they
that's
don't
good.
have They don't have varroa.
I don't
mite
think
there.
they have varroa mite yet. I think you're absolutely correct about that. Varroa mite is probably not there yet, and that could explain why their losses were more like what I saw when I was a kid before the varroa mite had arrived to destroy everything. We're going to move on. Quebec, 40% of the hives died over winter that year. Just 1 year ago, actually, is when they were unwrapping the bees and realizing what they'd lost. Poor Ontario, uh, that's Ontario, Canada. That's the center of the universe if you're Canadian. And that place lost half their 50%, almost the same. Well, this is the same as the United States, same number. I wonder if beat off American.
So you would have to
2.5.
think, that it's not a weather thing, because Newfoundland is pretty, and Labrador, don't forget Labrador, but it's a pretty cold place. And so it's not the cold, like it's probably varroas that's killing these winters. That's the number one.
Right,
say?
or at least the viruses that are being spread by varroa.
Right.
Mhm. That's right. So that's a good
Yeah, because-
observation.
Well, it's kind of obvious. Well, I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't say that. But why I
ahead.
say that?
Yep.
Because Quebec and Ontario, I mean, they don't have the most bees, but they are the most densely populated. Would you say?
Right.
Or-
They probably are the most densely populated with the colonies of bees because their bees are kept really close to the American border.
Right.
And compared to like Saskatchewan, that you can be 800 kilometers north of the American border, well, 600 for sure, and
Right.
have very viable beekeeping.
Yeah.
And same with Alberta too. Minnesota are closer to the border than they are further west. But here again, going past Ontario's 50% winter loss, we're looking at the winter loss for Manitoba of about 30. Well, it's also about 40% for Manitoba. Saskatchewan did really well. It's tucked in between Manitoba and Alberta. There's Saskatchewan. Only 20% of the colonies died over winter. Now, I lived in Saskatchewan for years and years, and I can tell you without any qualms or problems or people in Saskatchewan lie through their teeth. They may have lost half their bees, but they'll only report that they lost 20% of them. So we'll take that number with a grain of salt. I mean, for about 25 years, the total number of colonies of bees reported to the federal government by Saskatchewan was 100,000. Year after year after year after year after year, 100,000 colonies of bees were kept in Saskatchewan. It didn't go up or down like it did in every other part of Canada. So it made me kind of wonder, who's doing the counting over there. But I also want to add that they do things probably a little better with their beekeeping, their wintering. And so we got to give them some credit. 20% loss may be right. I don't know, but I'm gonna give them credit for not lying through their teeth on this one, but I wouldn't be surprised. Now we're out to Alberta, where honesty blows like the wind, um, or it's gone with the wind. But in Alberta, we have 300,000 colonies of bees. That's 3 times the number that there are in Alberta, and we lost a third of our colonies over that winter 2 years ago. And I remember beekeepers 2 years ago being pretty upset about their winter losses. How did you feel? Did you lose bees that year? This is not this spring that's coming up, but the spring like just a year ago.
And to put into perspective, sorry, what was the last part you just said there?
No, I was just wondering how your bees wintered for you. You're in Alberta.
Oh,
You had a few colonies of bees last year.
last year, we had all of them made it. We had seven that we had overwintered.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, all of them made it. Also, but my first year, I had 21, and out of the 21, 11 died. So 55%. And, I want to say the guy that gave me the bees, I think he pulled a fast one on me.
No.
Yeah. I believe the ones that made it over winter, they were strong colonies. And the ones that didn't, they were gonna die anyways. He gave me weak. He knew I was inexperienced. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyways, But
This is one of those things that what do they call it? When the person ahead of you in line pays for your coffee, you pass it on, what do they call that? Like there's a really
yeah, pass it
friendly
on. I
term.
think so.
Pass it on. Okay, so
Pay it
in our
forward,
pass it
pay it
on,
forward, pay it
pay it
forward.
forward. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. So yeah, you need to pay this forward someday.
Well,
Some new
I-
beekeeper's going to come along and they're going to be all starry-eyed and they're going to be excited. I'm going to keep bees this year. And there's Bedzina. He has his podcast. He's been around for years and years. So that's who you unload your garbage on.
So I was talking to Bill and Herman about the luxury beehive idea. Just a kind of little tangent, a little side note. And
Okay, for people who missed our episode where we talked about the luxury bee idea, would you want to go into what your business model is again?
yeah, it's slightly evolved a little bit, but essentially, long story short, is it's for affluent estate owners, so people that own rich estates that are looking for a functional art piece. They can place it on their yard, and inside this art piece will house a beehive. And that beehive comes with its own personal beekeeping assistant. Just one single beehive.
And a full-time at the location, putting up a tent, cooking their meals over a fire will be that beekeeping attendant.
Essentially, it will be a butler for this estate owner, but we haven't worked that part out. It'll be like a Uber model. That's the joke for everyone. But so the bill gave me this idea of a sculpture where a bear would be it would be a bear, and then inside of the bear would be the beehive, but somehow the mouth would be open, and the bear would be eating a pot of honey, and then there would be bees flying out of the bear's mouth.
I'll send you a picture that I took in Slovenia, the country in Europe called Slovenia. It's a very big beekeeping country, and there is a wooden beehive in their museum that is exactly that. It's made out of wood. So someone carved this black bear out of wood, and it was used as a beehive. So you took the bear's head off to access the combs inside, and the bees flew in and out of the mouth of the bear.
So my idea was, I don't want to give too much away, but essentially there would be a hollow spot from the back where the beekeeper would have access. And it would
So you kind of like reach up the butt of this bear?
well, there would be an access point where you could kind of slide out this Langstroth box and then do your
Okay.
beekeeping.
Okay. Well, I know
and
where
then
we get our chicken eggs, so I guess people would be happy to buy honey that came from kind of a similar location.
Well, I don't know. I got to work out the designs and stuff.
I
But
sure do. Yeah.
what I don't know why I brought that up. Well, that's my version of. I think if I do that, I will have no winter loss. If I'm
Because
Well, because we can't keep bees in a log, which is naturally how they like to live. They like to live in some sort of tree hollow. But if we can take a Langstroth box and put it inside of a log, then that's like meeting everyone in the middle. We're meeting the bees in the middle. We're meeting the city bylaw in the middle. It's
yeah, I have to regretfully, I have to give you some information here. Tom Seeley, he's a scientist that used to work at Cornell. I don't know, maybe he's still associated with, I think it's Cornell. Anyhow, he's written a dozen books, all good. He's a good writer and very respected scientist. He has spent years combing the forests in New York State, looking in the trees to try to analyze what do bees really like for wintering. Like, where do they build their nests? Where do they swarm to? How high off the ground? How big of a hole inside the tree, et cetera, et cetera. He will tell you that 25%, statistically, he's counted, he knows 25% of bees that live inside of trees die that year.
Okay.
So if we want to mimic a bee's natural nest, then we're going to have losses around 25%.
Well, it would be the it would be the aesthetics of a natural beehive, but it would have the insulating properties of a like a luxury beehive because this is made out
Well,
of
you'll have
exotic.
happy bees. I guess, that's worth something. We wanna see little grins on all those little faces of all those little bees. They just gotta be flying out there, even happier to fly home because, "Hey, that looks so good." Yeah.
It has the we and
Or you
you
sense
have to
any
be fair. It can be a
you're the one who
bolder.
made me cynical on this episode. Like, you started off by being cynical a little while ago, so here it is. It's coming right back at you.
No, no, no. But going back to this chart, so Alberta had
We're not
30.
we're not done with the chart.
Yeah, we're not done with it. Alberta had 33% provincial winter loss. Kind of going back to
Mhm.
the cynicism. Uh, uh,
Yeah.
but to put into perspective, 33% of loss in Alberta is almost the same. It's the more bees than what Ontario has, and and uh,
It
and
is.
maybe yeah.
Yeah. So 103,000, almost 104,000 colonies of bees died in Alberta during that one winter. And Ontario, at its peak during the summer, had 101,000 producing colonies of honeybees. So, yes, we lost more bees than Ontario has. And that was just over one winter.
So that
Mhm.
and I guess like if we put all of like beekeeping is not sustainable in Canada. We do not have the supplies to get the losses that we have. This
Well,
is kind
this,
of what the numbers tell me.
yeah. This is true, and it harkens back to my diatribe, from a few weeks ago when I said the border should have been opened to packages coming up from the United States. I know that, somebody in the distant future may come along and put huge tariffs on everything coming up from the United States and everything going from Canada down to the States. I mean, I don't think anybody who understands economics would do anything like that, but it's possible that we would be in a position where we wouldn't be able to get bees if we depended solely on the United States for our packages, but at least we would have another, source in
Because
addition to what we've already got.
imagine the worst case scenario happens where Alberta has a high winter loss, Manitoba has a high winter loss, so does Ontario, so does Quebec. And then a COVID type of situation happens where bees can't be brought in internationally.
That would never
Where
happen. That would never happen.
Well, that's almost in COVID that
I know, it did happen. I
yeah.
know, I know. I'm
So
just being,
exactly.
facetious here.
So that one,
Mhm,
if that scenario happens where you lose majority of your stock from your
mhm,
provinces, that like local supply, and plus you can't get it internationally, and then you've set
mhm.
up law where you've have, I guess they could do some emergency thing. Would they do an emergency where they bring it in from USA?
No, they had a chance to 3 years ago, and they refused.
Right. So there, it
Mhm.
could be a scenario of like where beekeeping just becomes this like ancient, like this only this high roller family generational. Like if you're either a beekeeper and you can afford it or you can't.
It'll be
There's
kinda
no
like the Wild West, outlaws, it'll be beekeeping will be a thing of legend.
yeah.
That guy, his great-grandfather used to be a beekeeper, and
Right.
everybody will go, "Oh, wow." Because that's what it's gonna be like in the future if things keep going with our biodiversity and our problems and issues that we keep coming up with. So, in all, Canada lost 36% of its colonies of bees last year, coming through into the spring of last year.
One thing to note: British Columbia doesn't have any data. They'll
Yeah, the problem there is when this, was written up, they had contacted the folks in British Columbia probably 20 times, and they just you know there's a different culture in BC. It's like not AD, it's very much like BC. And they're just slow, they take their time. And they didn't have anything ready to show yet. So what they did say is their preliminary estimate of mortality would be about 25%. So about a quarter of the hives they thought were going to be uh, there, but we didn't know for sure. So British Columbia, I think, has about 60 or 70,000 colonies of bees, and really, if you want a laid back lifestyle with nice climate, beautiful scenery, good people, lots of good fresh vegetables and fruits, a much shorter winter, and you could just live on the side of a mountain barefooted with a few sheep and a few hives of bees. British Columbia, I mean, of all the places that I know of, that's where I always thought I would someday live out there or retire there because I just love it. It's just really great. So they didn't give the data. They didn't have the data ready. They were just like, hey, next week, and then they would say, okay, next week is here, and they say, yeah, give us a few more days. I'm making this up, Bitsy. I have no
Yeah.
idea why we don't have data from British Columbia. But let's move on.
Okay, this is hottest weather in Canada is in British Columbia and also
It
in
is.
Sursa. Yeah,
Yes, it is. Sunniest, hottest, especially when the wildfires are going.
That's right. They love them.
Well, no,
Oh,
if
sorry, I
you
should-
put your thermometer in that, yeah, they don't love them. If you put your thermometer into a wildfire, you'll find it is the hottest spot in all of Canada. So do you want to look at this? These are common
Okay.
definitions used on the preceding page for the survey.
So a honeybee colony is defined as a full-sized honeybee colony either in a single or double brood chamber, not including nucleus colonies, in brackets, splits. Period.
Okay, so when we looked at that page that we described with the number of colonies during the summer that were going into winter, that doesn't include anybody's nukes, but very few nukes. Some nukes are winter, but I doubt if it's more than a couple thousand across the whole country.
Right. And
Okay,
then
so that's what they used for their total number of colonies going into winter. Then
and a viable honeybee colony in spring is defined as a honeybee colony that survived winter with a minimum of 4 frames, with 75% of the comb area covered with bees on both sides as of May 1st, British Columbia in brackets, May 15, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Ontario, Prince Edward Island, Quebec, or May 21st, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Period.
Okay. So let's clarify, first of all, for the people who are listening, it might sound a little bit confusing,
Yeah.
but 75% of the comb area should be covered on 4 frames on both sides in British Columbia on May 1st. So
Yeah,
British
that's-
Columbia is
yeah.
our warmest province. So on May 1st, and then in the center part of the country, Ontario and Quebec and so on, the Atlantic provinces, they would do that calculation, that count on May 15th. And then for those of us who live out on the prairies, as well as the people who live up in Labrador, I'll bet there aren't even any hives of bees in Labrador. Newfoundland, yes, 600 colonies. Labrador, I doubt it. Labrador is like where they make icebergs. Anyway, in Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland, there would be May 21 is the date that we want to have 4 frames of brood. Well, yeah, minimum of 4 frames covered with bees. That's not brood. That's covered with bees on both sides. So you might even have only 2 or 3 frames of brood. But that sounds so late, doesn't it? Because our main honey crop starts coming in around the 21st, 25th or so of June, and then it will last for a few months after that. So we are counting a viable bee colony in Alberta or Saskatchewan or Manitoba as having those 4 frames 75% covered by bees on both sides, May 21. That's pretty
Yeah.
generous for saying, yeah, it's alive. Normally,
Well,
our dandelion's coming in on May 21st here in
yeah, May
Alberta.
21st.
Dandelion is. Mhm.
No, I was just exactly you're saying, yeah, no, like May 21st, like, yeah, both of your brood boxes are usually full of bees.
There you go. And that's
And
what I
yeah,
would expect. But
yeah.
it's still a viable colony. And I guess we could make nukes around that time, make 4 or 5 frame nukes, and they still go on and produce a honey crop. So, yeah, I guess they're viable. Okay, those were just some definitions for how they count these things.
I guess that the viable, are they meaning like, so let's say by May 21st, if these colonies have less than 4 frames, they're considered to be dead.
Right, right. They would consider them not to be viable. So they might say,
So-
okay, maybe you can keep them going through the summer and they'll build up enough to winter. Or maybe you want to double 2 or 3 of those up into one hive.
Yeah, so that 33% number that we have in Alberta, or even like Manitoba, Saskatchewan, for that matter, they might be able to revive some of those
Yes,
lost.
they might. But we're saying, though, that even if you could, they have fewer than 4 frames with bees on them, and they're not going to be considered a honey producing colony.
Okay, but that's a potential. Yeah. Okay.
For the
Yeah. That's
following year. Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. Let's see what we got on the next slide.
Okay, so looking specifically at Ontario's losses, this is just a recap of what we'd already seen, but it says the year before the one we had just shown, it said the winter mortality in Ontario for the previous year for commercial beekeeping was estimated to be 36%. But here was the key thing that I thought was fascinating was that it was 49% of the colonies in Ontario had died the year before that. So I just brought this slide in and this to kind of reiterate the problems that there were out there, that it's not confined to any particular part of Canada. It's, we saw United States, now we saw various parts of Canada. We talked about Ontario, but let's go down to New Zealand for a moment.
Well, before we move, could we just go back to that slide for a quick sec?
Oh,
So-
it's hard to back up.
Well, it's just I wanted to say it said here the estimate for commercial beekeepers was approximately 10% more estimated. So that than for smalls. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So the commercial beekeepers, it doesn't say the exact number for commercial beekeepers.
Commission drops to 70%. Yeah, I'm not sure how to read that. What I do see is that
Small scale.
their estimated mortality was 36%. The estimate for commercial beekeepers in Ontario was approximately 10% more than the estimated loss for small scale beekeepers, which was estimated to be 26%. So it implies that there are very few colonies of bees among those beekeepers who are small scale beekeepers, and the small scale beekeepers had better success than the commercial ones did.
I see. So that the 10 plus 26 equals 36%, which came from majority of the commercial beekeepers.
Yeah, that
Okay.
doesn't quite work in my mind unless the number is really, really small of the total number of colonies kept by the smaller
Yeah.
beekeepers. Because if you average the two together, you should have something between 26 and 36. But
No, I mean, like it said 10% more than what the small scale. So theirs was 26%. So if it's 10% more, then it's 36%, and that's what the estimate was for all
for the
of Ontario.
average, for the
Yeah.
whole average of all of Ontario, so
Yeah.
that doesn't quite work.
No, so
Like mathematically.
what I'm saying is like there was maybe, it seems like there was like 1% of the beekeepers were small scale.
Nope, nope. It does seem like that based on what I just said, but I misread this, so I'm
Okay,
wrong.
never mind.
The
Never mind.
the overwintered mortality for commercial beekeepers was estimated to be 36, and for small scale beekeepers 26%, and for commercial beekeepers is 10% higher than that reported for
Okay.
small scale. So actually, they
Also,
are right. They do have this down correctly.
okay, there, it says there. Oh, it's 36%, 26. Okay, okay.
Let's move on. Come on, come on, come on.
Yes, yes, we got stuck
don't
in the
have a
weeds
little.
there a little bit.
We sure did. I can delete all of that out of our podcast part because it just goes in circles. But I wanted to bring in something else here because on the other side of the world, down in New Zealand, first of all, shout out to the hobbits that helped produce these photographs. I think that they still live in New Zealand. They were kind of like, do you know there's an island in Florida where monkeys, like chimpanzees, that were used in some Tarzan episodes, some movies, they escaped and they went to this island on a river in central Florida, near Ocala, Florida, near Silver Springs in Florida. And they're still there. Like this was filmed back in the 30s, 1930s, 1940s, and their descendants still occupy. They're free. You know, they escaped the captivity of the filmmakers and they're living there. And I'm just wondering if the hobbits that they used when they filmed the Hobbit series in New Zealand, if some of them escaped and they're still living as free men inside of New Zealand. And I think they are because this is a recent photograph of one of their houses. So for those of you privileged enough to watch our YouTube version of this episode, you're going to see a photograph that came from the studio where
This
these hobbits were living.
the story goes that the ring is hidden at the highest peak in New Zealand.
Oh,
Yeah,
who gave you that story?
that's what the hobbits say.
Yeah, I was going to say probably the same people who told me that the hobbits are still living in New Zealand. Okay, so we're talking about New Zealand now because it's such a contrast from Canada and the United States. Whole different climate, whole different set of, well, not 100%, but very much Manuki country. So they don't have as much of they do produce some clover honey, but they have very different sort of seasons. Everything's upside down. They have to glue their colonies to the soil so they don't fall off. It's just everything is so different in New Zealand. But here's the thing. They still lost a heck of a lot of colonies of bees. So I picked this up off of the New Zealand Colony Loss Survey for 2023. There's a PDF, and I'm going to put the PDF for link so you could go to their site and download your own copy. And I've also found this beautiful photograph of New Zealand. It's also being shown to people who are watching YouTube. The lower left-hand corner of my slide has a group of colonies of bees. They've got bands on, so they must have been being moved recently. It looks like they have got standardized Langstroth type equipment, an apiary setting with mountains in the background, beautiful greenness everywhere. And this photograph is from Midland Seeds. So I'll also have a link to Midland Seed Company, and that will be in the show notes for this. Meanwhile, from the survey of the winter losses and autumn losses. So this to me is amazing. They've gone out and they said, okay, it's fall now in New Zealand and it's coming close to wintertime and we lost a lot of bees. For instance, in the northernmost part of New Zealand, on the North Island, northernmost part, 26% of the colonies died in autumn, in the fall, and another 10% died over winter.
So
Now, I don't know if this is people taking their winter losses before winter, or if they just came out to start wrapping them up. Oh, dead one. Oh, another dead one over here. I don't know. I don't know.
so they get like a bit of a double whammy. It seems
They
like.
sure do. They sure
Yeah.
do. And that's
I
something
don't.
that, yeah,
Yeah, I was just gonna maybe would that be harder to manage because you don't have
I
that.
think it would. I think it would be much harder to manage. And when I was beginning my commercial beekeeping almost 50 years ago, I over 50 years ago. Oh, man, I'm getting old. I I would have never heard of anybody losing bee colonies in the summer. It just didn't happen. You didn't lose colonies in the summer unless your next door neighbor farmer had intensely sprayed DDT and it drifted right onto your colonies of bees, and then maybe they died, but bee colonies just didn't die in anything but winter in the old days. And now here we're seeing, not just in New Zealand, but all over the world, people are claiming winter losses in the summertime. They're claiming bee losses at any time of the year. Winter's particularly bad, but they could also be losing bees in the summer.
The second half of this episode will be released later this week, so stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in part 2.